The night I'm about to tell you about started with laughter, but quickly turned into one of those moments where you feel your stomach sink. We had been out on the trail all afternoon, a group of 6 friends who thought we knew these woods like the back of our hands. The sun was dipping low, shadows stretching long across the ground, and someone cracked a joke about how good dinner would taste once we got back to camp. That's when the realization hit. Our only map, the one we'd been relying on all trip, was sitting safe and sound back at camp. Not in my pack, not in anyone's pockets, just waiting for us where we weren't. At first, it didn't seem like a big deal. The trail had felt straightforward enough on the way out, and we figured retracing our steps wouldn't be all that difficult. But the thing about woods, especially as evening creeps in, is that they don't look the same going back. The trees seemed closer together, the path less obvious. The laughter quieted, and I could feel that unspoken tension settle over the group, the kind that makes you suddenly aware of every snap of a twig, every rustle in the undergrowth. Still, we weren't the type to panic. Instinct kicked in, along with that old stubborn streak of not wanting to admit we'd messed up. "All right," I said, trying to sound confident. "Let's use what we've got. Landmarks, gut sense, teamwork." We all nodded, some more convinced than others. We set off, scanning for familiar rocks, fallen logs, or bends in the trail. The smell of pine was sharp in the cooling air, and somewhere far off, a barred owl called out, reminding us just how quickly night was falling. What made it tricky wasn't that we didn't know the terrain, it was that everything looked familiar in the worst possible way. That boulder we swore we passed earlier, it had a twin 10 minutes later. The crooked tree we thought marked the trail fork. Turns out, half the forest was filled with crooked trees. The woods had a way of playing tricks on tired eyes, and each wrong turn only piled on more unease. But here's the thing about friends. When one person's confidence faltered, another picked it up. Emily, who had the sharpest eyes of the bunch, spotted the faint imprint of boot tracks in softer patches of dirt. James, always level-headed, reminded us to keep calm and conserve energy. We started working as a unit, moving slower, more deliberate, keeping each other in sight. It was no longer just a hike back to camp. It had turned into a small test of trust, instincts, and a little bit of luck. And right as the last of the daylight slipped away, we found ourselves standing at the edge of a small clearing. My heart lifted. I was sure I recognized it from earlier in the day, but the question hung heavy in the air. Was it the right clearing, or just another trick of the woods? We stood at the edge of that clearing, each of us staring hard, like we could will it into being the right. 1. The air had cooled, a dampness settling in that clung to our sleeves and carried the smell of moss and soil. A faint line of pink still clung to the horizon, but the woods around us were already folding into shadow. No one wanted to admit it, but we all knew. If we didn't figure this out soon, we'd be stumbling in the dark. "I think this is it," Emily said quietly, pointing to a cluster of birches on the far side. "Remember the way the bark peeled? We passed those earlier." Her voice carried more certainty than her eyes did. James crouched low, scanning the ground. "Boot prints," he muttered, running a hand across the dirt. "Hard to tell in this light, but looks like we came through here." He straightened, brushing his hands off on his jeans. "If we're wrong, we're burning time." A hush fell. The forest wasn't silent, not really. Crickets had started their chorus, and every now and then something small scurried through the underbrush, but it felt like the trees themselves were listening, waiting to see what we'd do. I could feel the weight of leadership pressing on me, even though no one had voted me leader. I cleared my throat. "All right, if this is the clearing, then camp should be about a mile west near the creek. Let's test it. If we find water, we'll know." We tightened ranks, choosing to trust Emily's memory and James's tracking. The path out of the clearing wasn't obvious. It twisted between low shrubs and a mess of roots that caught our boots. More than once, someone stumbled, and the darkness made it harder to tell if we were drifting off course. But every so often, we found a breadcrumb, a snapped branch that looked familiar, a patch of wildflowers we swore we'd seen on the way out. "Listen," Sarah whispered after a while, holding up her hand. We froze. At first, all I could hear was my own pulse drumming in my ears. Then, faint but steady, came the unmistakable sound of moving water, a creak. Relief washed through me, so strong I nearly laughed. We followed the sound, hearts lifted, but the forest wasn't done testing us. The creek, when we reached it, was not the one we remembered. The banks were narrower, choked with reeds, and there was no sign of the flat patch of earth where our tents waited. We had found water, yes, but not the water we needed. For a moment, doubt crept back in. I saw it in everyone's faces, the quiet calculation of how long it would take to hike blind, whether we should stop and make a fire or push on. I could almost feel the woods closing in tighter, as if they wanted to keep us there. That's when Luis, who'd been quiet most of the time, pointed upstream. If we follow it, it might lead to the main creek. They usually connect. His voice was calm, steady, and it gave us direction when we needed it most. And so, once again, we fell into line. 6 friends against the woods, walking beside the trickle of water that might just lead us home. The creek became our guide, but in the dark it was a fickle one. Moonlight filtered down through the canopy in broken shards, glinting on the water's surface and giving us just enough light to keep moving. The banks were uneven, sometimes forcing us to climb over tangled roots or slip along slick mud that threatened to dump us right into the stream. Every splash of a misplaced boot echoed like a shout in the silence of the night. We tried to keep spirits up. Sarah hummed under her breath, some tune I half recognised, just enough to remind us we weren't alone out there. James muttered directions now and then. Stay close to the bank. Watch that root. His voice, the steady hand that kept us from unravelling. Still, unease was gnawing at the edges of our resolve. Every snapped twig in the distance made us pause. Every rustle of leaves overhead had us scanning the shadows. The forest wasn't threatening us outright, but it wasn't offering comfort either. It was neutral, indifferent, waiting to see if we would earn our way back. We moved in the stretches, taking short breaks when someone needed to catch their breath. I remember one moment in particular. Emily crouched near the water's edge, trailing her fingers in the current. It feels right, she whispered, like this is pulling us home. She said it almost like a prayer, and though no one replied, I think we all wanted to believe her. An hour slipped by, maybe more. Time was hard to measure without the sun. At one bend in the creek, the water widened into a shallow pool. Fireflies hovered above it, their glow reflected in the ripples. It should have been beautiful, but it only reminded us how far from campfires and lantern light we really were. My stomach tightened. I started wondering if we'd passed the main creek without noticing, or if we were walking deeper into nowhere. Then trouble found us. Luis was the first to stumble, his boots sliding on a slick rock. He went down hard, the splash sending cold water across our legs. We rushed to haul him up, but the rock had caught his shin on the way. A shallow cut, but bleeding all the same. Sarah tore a strip from her bandana and tied it around his leg while we steadied him. It wasn't serious, but it rattled us. Suddenly the stakes of being out here without a map felt heavier. We weren't just lost anymore, we were vulnerable. The group grew quieter after that, our footsteps heavy, the silence pressing in. And then, faint but sure, came a sound we all recognised. The low, steady roar of a larger stream. Relief flared again, but it was cautious this time. We had been fooled once before. We pressed forward, the sound growing louder with each step, until the trees broke open to reveal a wider, faster-moving creek. It cut through the forest with a strength that made the smaller stream seem like a trickle. The air was cooler here, carrying the scent of wet stone and rushing water. My chest swelled with hope. Is this it? Emily asked, her voice trembling between excitement and doubt. We stood together on the bank, staring at the water, straining to see if we recognized the shape of it. It was close, so close, but none of us could be sure. We gathered on the bank of that larger creek, the roar of the water filling the silence between us. The moon hung high, bright enough to silver the ripples, but not enough to show us whether this was truly our way home. The air felt cooler here, heavier too, like the forest was leaning in to hear our decision. No one wanted to admit how tired we were, but I could see it in everyone's faces. The sag of shoulders, the slower breaths, the way our steps had dragged those last few 100 yards. James was the first to break the silence. "If we follow it downstream, we'll find camp, I'm sure of it." He said it firmly, but I caught the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He was as worn as the rest of us, and I knew he hated gambling on a hunch. Sarah sat down on a smooth stone and pulled her jacket tight. "Or we walk for hours and find nothing. We're already stumbling. Someone's going to get hurt worse than Luis if we keep going like this." Her words hung there, sharp but true. Luis shifted uncomfortably, his leg bound with the makeshift bandage, the dampness of the night already soaking through it. Emily crouched low, studying the flow of the creek as if it could give her an answer. "If this is the main creek, camp should be downstream, not upstream. That much I remember." She traced a finger in the dirt, sketching a rough map from memory, though it was hard to tell if it matched what we stood before. We went back and forth, voices low but tense, the weight of the choice pressing heavier than any pack we carried. Do we risk pushing forward through the night, or stay put, make a fire and wait for morning light to guide us? The longer we argued, the colder the night grew. Our breath came in clouds now, the kind that clung to the air. Finally, I spoke. "We can't wander blind. We set up here, make a fire, and wait it out. At dawn, we'll know for sure which way to go." I half expected protest, but instead, a ripple of relief moved through the group. None of us wanted to admit it, but the idea of stopping, even in uncertainty, felt like a mercy. We set about the task in silence, each of us grateful for the distraction. James and Luis gathered driftwood from the banks, while Emily and Sarah cleared a patch of ground. The smell of wet bark clung to our hands, but soon enough sparks caught, and a small flame grew into the heart of our little camp. The warmth drew us in like moths, our faces lit in flickering gold while the shadows deepened beyond. Huddled around the fire, we let exhaustion settle over us. The forest seemed less menacing now, softened by the crackle of burning wood. Even the rushing creek became a comfort, a steady voice in the background. Sarah pulled her knees to her chest and whispered, "You know, this is the part we'll remember, not making it back, but sitting here like this." I couldn't help but smile at that. She was right. Lost or not, we had each other, and in that moment, that was enough. Dawn crept into the woods like a slow breath, the first streaks of light slipping through the branches and painting the creek in pale gold. I woke to the smell of damp ash and the soft murmur of the water beside us. For a moment, I forgot where we were, only to remember with a jolt that we were still far from camp, but the fire's embers still glowed faintly, and my friends stirred one by one, their faces weary yet calmer than the night before. Somehow, the darkness had tested us, but not broken us. We doused the fire, shouldered our packs, and stood at the creek's edge. In the daylight, everything looked different. The trees were less foreboding, the bends of the water less confusing. Emily pointed downstream, her voice firm this time. "That way, I know it now." And she was right. The slope of the bank, the curve of the water, even the way the birches leaned toward the current, it matched the memory we'd doubted in the night. So we set off again, this time with sunlight at our backs and a steadier rhythm to our steps. Luis limped a little, but his grin returned as the forest brightened. Birds sang overhead, and the cool air felt less like a warning and more like a promise. We followed the creek for perhaps an hour, maybe less. It's strange how distance blurs when you're so close to safety. Then, through the trees, I caught sight of something that made my heart lurch. The familiar blue tarp of our camp, sagging slightly between two pines. The cheer that rose from our group could have scared every bird out of the forest. We stumbled into camp like conquerors returning from battle, laughing, clapping each other on the shoulders, dropping our packs with a relief so deep it nearly knocked us to our knees. The fire pit still held the ashes from the morning we'd left, and our map sat neatly folded inside a gear bag, waiting for us all along. We cooked breakfast slow that morning, letting the warmth of the sun and the crackle of the fire ease away the night's tension. Nobody complained, nobody blamed. We just ate, grateful, every bite tasting richer than it should have. Looking back, I think that night taught us more than any map could. We learned how much trust mattered, how instincts sharpen when you're forced to rely on them, and how a group of friends can turn fear into strength. The woods didn't beat us. They reminded us what it means to lean on each other. And even now, when I unfold a trail map before heading out, I can't help but smile. I know that if I ever leave it behind again, I'll still find my way. Because sometimes the best compass you can carry is the company of those walking beside you.